Dude, how many times have you watched this?
So many times, dude. Do you still hear me? Okay, good. I wear this because I'm not vaccinated. No, I'm vaccinated, but I also take methylene blue and scorpion venom. Scorpion milk. Do you guys know that scorpions have tits? Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, we put a little bit of salsa on it, but I got plenty of salsa.
You really did that? So why did anyone see it?
Only one person commented about it, but I didn't want to make the whole interview about what I just did. I was trying to do like incognito mode.
That's funny.
And so like one person said something and I was happy with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I feel like they have to do something for me to do this. I don't have done a lot. This has been a great stream, y'all.
Yeah, you guys are the best.
All right, fair enough. You know, you deserve what you deserve.
Don't ask because you're a Guadalajara Mexican bot.
It might take me a long time to do this because my wrists are broken.
Oh, dude, we got like 45 more hours left.
Dude, I'm not flirting with the idea of this.
Yeah, you can put the mic down.
I'm not.
Remember when we were like preparing for this? We're like, dude, it's gonna suck, but we'll just do it. It doesn't suck that bad, dude. It's pretty cool. I'm at BC today, dude. Isn't that crazy?
Dude, that was amazing.
Right?
And also, opening this made me feel like that right-wing podcaster that couldn't open the pickle jar. That guy. I was like, oh shit, I'm that guy.
I didn't open it all the way and leave it like that open and then just pour on top. That's what I did earlier.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's so bad, dude. It sucks.
This is the worst joke ever written for this.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I mean, I'm cool with that if you're...
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, you're good.
It's enough, right? Because you don't need the juice.
It's just salsa.
It's salsa.
You're not even Mexican.
ASW, fix your mic. That's from a while ago, B.
Oh, Nathan, charge your phone, dude.
Cooney, how did you meet BC? On the street.
Just had him right at.
Bot. Good one, bot.
Anorexic dyslexic is he wants to watch Gringo Poppy.
You have a line of roses.
Good one, bot.
Yeah, bots. I thought we would get actual viewers for this stream. Didn't know it was going to be all bots.
Yeah, a lot of bots going down.
I'm not gonna lie to you, I did put more salsa than that, but it's fine because you're holding down the fort, I'm holding down the fort.
Who wants me to have the salsa cook, Mexican cook? Does anyone in the chat want me to eat this cookie?
So much love.
35, I love your content.
Squad wants me to eat it. That's one person.
I try to follow Brandon like grateful that he could cancel shows to go from there and not have that. These blue cheese sandwiches.
We're trying to follow Brandon like a grateful
All caps.
canceling.
Eat it now.
Stupid. Now
I Tapatio. Actually, this isn't Tapatio. This is,
I have some tapatio if you want.
processing. That's not salsa.
It is technically salsa. Yeah.
All right, fine.
Okay, good.
This shit is hard to fucking work with. Can you please take this from me? Thank you. It looks good. It's hard, dude. I struggle to open it. It's keto, bitch.
We're not locked out like girls fight with me the other week. You're locked out. We're fighting.
You know what? Maybe it's more of a as if it's like it's a really serious topic. It is also.
I kind of tried to cook you with tapatio now, dude.
I'm worried that family of mine will someday see that.
They're all over us, dude.
I mean, people should stop talking to me.
Oh, that's Daddy's number right there, dude. That's what I know.
At least I got some weak jersey, so I'm not assaulting.
Yeah. This is kind of like a homeless cat's wet dream, huh? 24 hours of just a Gringo Poppy, dude.
Yeah.
No, fuck no, I'm not into that.
I got a Diet Coke so I can leave unscathed.
Oh, great idea, but I'm good with water right now. Perhaps in a minute.
Oh, he's fucking his friends again? Shout out to Walking Dead. Good to see you again, dude.
Oh shit.
Dude, shout out to all the new subscribers. We've gotten a lot of subscribers today, dude.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. Hope you're enjoying it. You know, this started off surprisingly as a podcast about raccoons and teeth. Yeah. It's about Yasop Week. Where's the dolphin bottle, Cooney? I wish I'd brought that. The dolphin bottle is so fucking funny.
Yeah.
I guess you can only get that if you watch Raccoon Tweeties. Guess it's only on the Patreon. I guess.
Hi, guys are awesome. But
I'm walking over to school. I'm like, dude, we lit this.
Big boy squad. Big boy.
can you get a you have to spin around at halfway?
I can't the special anymore, but I don't need to. That's what I'm just telling you that so you know. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
I think it's my headset.
I think it's just playing in my head like reverberating.
I don't know if I fucked this up or what.
Oh, try right here. Oh, shit.
I said, you're the parents, dumbass.
That one guy loves that joke. Oh, savage. No.
But I don't need to.
Yeah, you,
I'm fine with this.
you put in the hours, dude.
Yeah. I mean, it's all good until we have more guests.
Yeah.
You'll hear this.
Listen,
Imagine we can get Brendan Schaub at the last minute.
That would be insane.
He came on. I could dream. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I keep looking at Instagram hoping that he's messaged me.
Yeah. I know, right? Well, we don't matter.
No,
We don't count.
we don't count.
I say that happy too. I'm like, we don't matter.
I would also break my headphones. It's like I did it on purpose. I didn't have to hear the drink of coffee anymore. I still see it though. It's almost Cooney. All right. Who said that? Mr. Catatonic. Wow, this shit breaks.
Oh yeah, it's really, really breakable.
Melting. So this is the first bite of a Mexican cookie.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
It's gross, huh?
It's really gross.
And then you know what, dude? I forgot the first time when we did it. It leaves a fucking taste in your mouth that's just like unbearable.
Yeah.
I ate a whole cookie. You know, you don't have to.
No, I'm kidding. I just wanted to. That was disgusting.
It is disgusting.
It's like the joke is so quick, it can be so funny.
Yeah. I think that's why it's funny, because it is gross.
I just want to be authentic. I know.
Yeah.
Oh.
every night, though, every night, 7 years later,
Oh my God.
fucking night. I know I look like this.
But I did just like this also.
It smells like Tapatio, too. That's disgusting.
I'm glad they can't really see.
Yeah.
It's like too small. Because I think if you saw this up close, you'd be grossed out. This is chili. God.
Is this what I was too?
Hey, we're gonna watch Brendan's podcast. Oh my God!
Hey guys, let's all gather around and watch it.
Instead of Van Lehman's, like, imagine if Cooney vomited in a hazmat suit. I guess that's the perfect way to vomit.
Take a picture with your phone. Oh, okay. I don't have my phone.
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe Brendan's not trying to shit his pants. How about that?
Brendan's not trying to shit his pants tonight. How about that? Ready?
Every time dinner would come, I ask him like this.
I'm gonna send this to the Discord.
Dude, I might pass out from this face mask.
Take the face mask off.
No, because then I pass out for a couple hours. I wake up.
You want it? That's awesome. I'm sending the I should post that on Reddit.
Yeah. Or
I think let's test. You always hate. You say I can't multitask.
oh, go for it.
We'll prove you wrong right now. So fuck you. You're a bot. You're being like all super nice to me. I'm like, fuck you. You're a bot. I'll just say, look at this bot.
Shout out to Mark, dude. Chick Williams. Shout out to Brent Walsh. Shout out to Brian Campbell, dude. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, shout out to everybody that came and
apologies to Sean McCorkle. We'll do another 24 hours
I
tomorrow.
want you on. I'm going to apologize, but I guess you got to go beat up Mark.
Oh, that's what he said? Damn.
He didn't say that.
Damn, that's crazy. He's always saying shit like that, huh?
Oh, man. Dude. What was your favorite part of the DC interview?
Oh, I mean, dude, BC saying he wants to get Mel. That was pretty cool. Happy endings if you need a place around here. I'm like, oh, this guy's one of the 250. You know what I mean? It's
Man.
like the quickness he has with the fucking, you know what I mean?
Dude.
Shout out to the subscribers, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a crazy interview. Somebody said something that I wanted to react to, and now I can't remember what it is because my brain is dead. But I'll tell. Actually, no. It's not even something that I wanted to touch on the fact that the Red Bull actually works.
Oh yeah.
Like I feel better.
Yeah.
Usually Red Bull makes me feel like crap.
You know what's funny is that the fucking rain did not work. Because I was like knocking out during that ASW.
Oh man.
The ASW interview, I was kind of like dozing off. But you were on fire, dude. You were like,
Oh really?
Yeah.
I mean, I thank you. The fucking the Red Bull was a good idea by you, you took one for the team. You had a rain. You deserve props for that. Because I am a bitch. I won't drink it. I think it's disgusting. But you will.
Yeah, dude.
So thank you.
My body's a dumpster, dude.
You're a bot.
When I
a bot.
When I match with chicks on Bumble, I go, I'm a bot. My body's a dumpster. Yeah.
And it's like food. It could be anything. I eat sausage salad.
And by the way, we're gonna eat some.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sausage is great. It's probably healthier than pizza.
That'd be funny if you were like,
Now. Man, you again on the place is very clean. You did a great. You did a wonderful setup. You didn't land the end. You did a perfect setup, right? You cleaned. The setup was amazing. You're like, say it again. It's so funny. You didn't stick the landing because you were asleep when I got.
Oh, you're right. I was asleep when you got here, dude. I can stay up late.
It's so funny to set everything up perfectly and then just be asleep. You're like, and I did it all. I'm ready. Brandon's probably going to show up at fucking 10. And then you're asleep.
Yeah. Support heart.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a bot.
Red Hogs emoji.
B stands for fucking bot.
Cooney is being held hostage, says a side. Sorry, bot. Great. Another bot comment. What are we going to do with that? Put it with the rest of the bot comments.
And to Assad?
You've never actually done that before. I don't think you've ever been asleep. I think I have slept through.
I haven't been asleep.
You haven't or have?
I have, I think.
I'm sure I've slept.
Oh no, I'm thinking about getting picked up for gigs. When Jesus picked me up for gigs, and they would do the same thing you did, scream in my window.
Yeah, it's funny. It makes it easier to get in contact with that setup that you got.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Have I ever slept through late?
Yeah.
Not often. Neither of us are really late.
I mean, I got my beauty sleep.
Brent Gordo, why aren't taking this opportunity to sit in this out with your toe holds on, commit to the bit? You don't want to see my feet.
Yeah.
Haven't I talked about that before? How gross my feet are?
You have a hammer toe.
Hammer toe, yeah. The two middle toes both have hammer toe, which makes the nail look like something out of Lord of the Rings. And I have flat feet. Damn, I really am fucked up.
What's another thing I love about the
Damn, it's 6 o'clock, dude. Dude, that's 9 hours.
We got more time because we can maybe send a link to IBM maybe 9.
Oh, you mean like their time, 9:30?
Yeah, so like that's not far from that.
In 30 minutes.
It's like 30 minutes.
Okay. So, and then after that, we'll do some sausage salad. I've been eating bakers like crazy. Bakers right now, dude.
This stream is a plot to kill Cookie. Oh my god. Cookie's disgusting.
Gargoyle food is fuck. That's a bot.
Alright, another bot.
What time do you remember from getting the Brendan shop in Wolf's Farm? Another bot question. Oh, you ate it? You're like prolonging the misery. I would just shove it in the pot. Shove it all in there.
I make vomit.
I literally put it on top of the cookie and then just shoved it all in my mouth.
I don't think that part. It's funny, like, here's what's funny to me now. There are parts of it that don't have hot sauce or salsa on it. But when they eat the it's just like a flashback. These guys are these cookies.
I want to see. I can show you me.
Let me see.
I can't see shit, dude. Where's my house? I can't see.
Disgusting. Give me some beans and cheese.
I don't know where my phone's at.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm actually.
Why is it so bad? I love cappuccino. It's so bad. You know what sucks? And I've fully come to terms with this. I'll talk to Chad about this. Cholula. Cholula sucks. I would use it if I had no hot sauce, but I used to hate on the original Tabasco. The original Tabasco is way better. Cholula is shit. Cholula is worse than cutting.
I'm so glad we were recording for 9 hours. I didn't know that's how long it took for you to do Cholula sucks ass.
Cholula is terrible.
Yeah, Cholula's fucking god awful bottle though.
Yeah, it looks like it'd be good, but every hot sauce is bad. Every hot sauce.
Yeah, every single one.
Dude, if someone told me that they like Cholula over Louisiana hot sauce, I would just be like, bot. I would never talk to them again.
Same, dude.
Crystal, well, Crystal's good, and I do agree with you. Papa Camp that it's better than 10. Extra speed kind of sucks, but it's still better than like that's still way better.
I'll figure it out.
I'm trying to find the spot where I ate the cookie.
Hot sauce is good. It just doesn't belong on a cookie.
Yeah.
Jelly roll might love this. Can you imagine jelly roll eating Tabasco cookies? Like, I tried that American cookie. You mean to tell me you eat cookies without salsa? Baby girl told me that we could have it together. She makes them for me. I stopped eating one shots, but during the week, I get back to it.
What kind of salsa jelly roll?
Pico de gallo. Chili. I like Mexican cookies more than I like singing about smoking meth. Somebody put some salsa on my cookie. I wish Jelly Roll would do the show because he's my favorite singer and comedian.
Yeah.
I believe in Bigfoot. So thank him.
Thank him. The spot.
I don't know what turtle sauce is. Is that English? Everything is British to me, but you're a big hot sauce.
I'm trying to find where I eat the fucking.
Can we watch a Jelly Roll rap video? No, because Poppy's on. You're a bot.
Yeah, you're a bot.
T87 classic bot.
That is not good.
Well, I know a bot named Leslie.
Yep.
In fact, what's the hottest sauce you guys like?
I like habanero sauce, dude.
Yeah, habanero's pretty good. When I was in Nashville, I went to Prince's, and with the mayor, and that was delicious, but it was too hot to eat.
Oh, that's when I ate it. Oh, that's when I ate it. Look at my fucking face, dude. Look at, I'm putting this on it right there. See?
Oh, I see.
And then I ate it.
All right.
It's disgusting. I ate it all in one bite.
That's gross. All right, one last bite. Who should I dedicate this bite?
Dedicated to SBs.
All right, yeah, I'm dedicating FB. Thank you for all your generous donations.
Yeah.
I'm donating this last just as the most awesome.
Fuck you, bot. Fuck you, dude. We're not doing T-Mos for 5 months after this, dude.
When is the next universe?
Not a bot. Yeah. My mouth is still, I'm not even joking, it still feels like it has some remnants of it. Cooney's a beast.
Nowhere now. You can see everything, dude. That cat's fucked, bro.
Thank him.
I'll let you know, man.
Anything for you guys. This is the second fucking hot sauce cookie I ate.
I know, it's disgusting, dude.
That one had a lot of salsa on it.
We overdid the first one.
DCP Inc. 87. I will kill you, bot. I forgot. I'm supposed to make it seem like it's not a real friend. It's a joke.
Wow! I'm out of bed, right? Yeah! And then I always have my Uggs bedside, right? My Uggs will be right
Damn,
there.
dude. Dicey. You didn't have to do this to yourself. Well, yeah, I guess so.
I mean, that's what we say every time we record.
Man, Lehman, that's a bot comment. 5% batty. 5% battery. What? You're?
Oh, no, you're good.
He's getting plenty better.
Who's seen 5%? Oh, he's talking about his phone.
Oh, get a better phone.
Nathan was at 8% earlier. Now he's at 5.
Oh, shit.
Every video I've ever seen, online, those mountain lions have, those sockets. That goddamn nose.
Man. Yeah, I mean, I still feel pretty good, surprisingly, cogent, and I haven't fallen asleep. That Red Bull, I've just an ad for Red Bull now. I feel good. I will feel horrible tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow's going to sleep at 5 in the morning tomorrow. That's horrible.
I don't have to wake up early, but I probably should.
Right?
That's super extreme.
So I guess 5 in the morning Monday.
Oh, God.
I'm just going to sleep all day tomorrow.
Yeah.
Who wants a hot chip?
Never mind.
We should have had that fool bring us hot chips.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that might be kind of gross, dude. That might be.
Who wants a hot chip? Look at the clock, so
Picture of that. Kiss myself laughing. Kiss myself laughing. Yeah, it's 5 a.m. and I'll tell you right now. 7 days ago. Hey, a lot of the suggestions that you have would be great. I'm sure we'd love to have last one, but get serious.
He's deep in the simulacrum.
right?
This pod makes repairs. True.
Enough, kitty.
What time did Mark leave? How about boss?
It's a line.
It's a line of the mount, dude.
Big boy squad, big boy nation. Throwing up the squad when you're dripping up the dump. Have a kiss.
Was upheld. It says King David gave smicha to many thousands of people. King David was the source, and he gave smicha. The smicha was upheld through great self-sacrifice, and that was one of the things the Romans were desperate to abolish. They gave it that with a death sentence. Anybody recalled giving smicha would be put to death because they were desperate to get rid of the Jew. Rabbi Akiva gave 5 students. One of them was called Meir, Rabbi Meir, who was the next great sage of the next generation. And he was the one who received smicha from Rabbi Akiva. This time, Rabbi Akiva lived till 120, but at the end of this time, he was arrested for publicly teaching Torah. A fellow came to him when he was in prison and said, "Rebbe, what are you doing? You're risking your life. He was in prison, and he told him the famous allegory of the who went by the river bank and he saw the fish swimming backwards and forwards, and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, the fishermen, they want to catch us." Says the fox to the fish, "Well, come with me, come to the drive there." He said, "Stupid fox, we thought you were clever, you're not. If we stay in the water, then either way, we'll make it. We'll get caught, we won't get caught. But if we go with you on the dry land, our end is clear." Said Rabbi Akiva, "Whether I'll make it or not, questionable. But whether we have to teach Torah, that's a must. That is Jewish survival." The Romans tortured Rabbi Akiva in the most horrible fashion, and they combed him with iron combs, with steel combs, and he died with Shema Yisrael, and he died with the word Echad. And he told his students at the time. His students were standing there, and Rabbi Akiva said to his students that all my life I was waiting for the time when I could fulfill the verse, with all your heart, with all your soul. Now is the time when I was able to love Hashem with all my soul, when he gave his life up for Hashem. And that's how he died. But again, Rabbi Akiva lived to be one of the greatest sages ever for the Jewish people. There was, as we said, Hadrian. Hadrian lived in the time after. There was Hadrian, and then there was Antoninus. Antony, who lived after, was a good king. And in those days, the Chacham, the sages of the time, gathered a place called Usha. But Usha is in the Galil, because Judea was totally destroyed. There was nothing left to do there. So they went to Galil. That is why most of the sages of the Jews at this time are buried in the Galil. We'll go through it. We're going to go where you have Rabbi Akiva. We know where his tomb is today. Rabbi Akiva is buried in I believe it's close to Tiberias, which is all in Eretz Yisrael, and that's where they all are. Reb Shimon ben Yochai, in a minute, it's also all the way up, not in Judea, not around Jerusalem. Why not? there was nothing there. Couldn't live there. There's two more sages which we're going to go through, which were cast a tremendous light on the people at the time. The successor, basically, even of Rabbi Akiva was Reb Meir. Now, actually, his real name was not Meir. His real name was either Nehorai or Nehemiah. His real name is unclear. He was nicknamed Meir. Meir means the luminary. He illuminated the people in his time with Jewish law. He came after Bar Kokhba. Basically, the time of Hadrian, the time of Bar Kokhba, the time of Rabbi Akiva. This was a Holocaust time. This was Beitar. This was terrible. He came in the aftermath of that. Rabbi Meir came from converts. I forgot to say before. Rabbi Akiva was either Akiva ben Yosef. Many say Yosef himself was a convert. If anything, however, Rabbi Akiva's grandfather was definitely a convert. He was a descendant. His yichus was, do you remember Sisera? Sisera was the one in the time of Deborah. She sang a song. Sisera was the one who came and attacked the Jews and got his head out. He's got his, that was the lineage of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Meir was called Nero. Nero in Caesar. Nero himself, according to the Gemara, converted. He gave up on Jerusalem because he heard that he stopped some children outside Jerusalem, and he was into superstition. He was into all this kind of thing. So he stopped the child and he asked him to tell him what he learned. And the child basically said the verse that came from the prophets that said that basically the Almighty employs people to punish the Jewish people for what they have done, and then takes revenge from them. So he says, I'm not going to be subject to that. And he went and converted. And then from him came Reb Meir. Meir was a descendant of converts. Reb Meir had a very famous wife, talking about Jewish women. Have you heard of Bruria? Bruria is very famous among Jewish women. She was the wife of Reb Meir. A very fearsome lady she was. She was at the time when Rabbi wasn't available to give the drasha, she would stand behind the mechitza, says the Gemara, and give it instead of him. She was one of those people. She was very sharp individual. She used to put Rameh straight. There was some people who lived in the neighborhood of Rameh who were extremely evil, and Rameh came over and said, "Right, I'm davening to Hashem that they should all die." So she said, "No." She said, "Yitamu chatoim." It says in the verse that sin should cease. They're not sinners. Pray that they should return, they should do tshuva. And he said, "Oh, you're right." And he followed her advice, says the Gemara. The Talmud tells us she was so studious. In one day she learned 300 laws from various chachamim. She got them all together. She learned 300 halachas in one day from the chachamim of the time. His Reb Meir is known today. Reb Meir, the owner of miracles, the one who performed miracles, and the story behind that is Reb Meir's father-in-law was a great sage who was called Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion. He was one of the 10 sages who were killed by Hadrian in that era. And Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion had a daughter, the sister-in-law of Reb Meir. What happened was, and what happened, that she was a very beautiful girl, and the Romans kidnapped her and put her in a place where she would be put to use, so to speak. Rabbi was desperate to get her out. Rabbi, what he did was he went to the place, and there was a guard there, and he told the guard, I'll pay you for this girl. So the guard said, "I'll be fed to the dogs if there's someone missing." He said, "Don't worry." He said, If anything happens, you say, Elakod Reb Meir Aneni, the God of Reb Meir, answer me, and everything will be fine. I laughed at him. He said, "You want to try me out? Try me out." There was Alsatian dogs, which would rip up a human being. And said Reb Meir, said the dogs on me, "Look, it will happen." He said the dogs on him. Reb Meir said, "Elakod Reb Meir Aneni, the God of Reb Meir, answer me." And the dogs sat down and were all peaceful and good. He heard what he had to say. He took the money and he gave out the sister-in-law of Reb Meir. There was soon after that, the Romans made a head count. They saw one was missing. The guard's off with his head, right? He shouted, "Elakod Reb Meir Aneni," and something happened. The guard, there was a threat from the other side. They ran, he ran, and everything was fine. Reb Meir became known as Reb Meir Baal Hanes, Reb Meir, the one who performed miracles. In the 1800s, there started to be a tzedakah, there started to be a charity who printed the name of Reb Meir Baal Hanes on the charity box, and it was a merit to give charity which bear the name of Reb Meir Baal Hanes, and many saw miracles in that way until today. The charity exists. One of the big ones is Chabad, the Alter Rebbe by the Shnei Zam of Liadi to support those who were in Israel, and that carries the name of Reb Meir Baal Hanes until this very day on the tzedakah pushkas. You'll see, and it was always considered a merit. That means the idea lasted all that time through. Reb Meir and his wife Bruria also went through difficult times. They lost 2 children. On one particular Shabbos, the 2 children passed away. Reb Meir was out in shul. And Reb Meir came back, and Bruria, being the woman she was, didn't say a word. Made as if they were sleeping. Once a Shabbos, after Shabbos Eve, she came and she said, "I had a deposit. Someone entrusted me with something. Should I give it back to him?" And I said, "Sure, of course you should give it back." So she said, "Come," and she showed him. She said, "Hashem entrusted us with children. We have to give it back." And that's how she sort of even taught Reb Meir of how to deal with what they had. In the end, Reb Meir actually passed away in Turkey. The whole thing, he had to go up there. He passed away over there, and many say he's buried there. Although there is a tomb in Eretz Yisrael which is accredited to him. Many say it's not that, but it's anyway. The Gemara says he passed away in Turkey. The last one who we'll talk about is Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai also lived in Roman times. He was a student of Rabbi Akiva. He was one of the 5 who received the smicha. He was one of the survivors after the 24,000 students passed away. As we know his story, the Romans executed him terribly, wanted to kill him. He had to hide in a cave for 13 years. until the emperor died and everything was able to emerge again. Rav Shimon ben Yochai is very important. He was the first one to go into the transcription. Next week we're going to talk maybe a whole lesson about how the oral law came and was transcribed and all the names and details of what we need to know about the oral law being transcribed. Rav Shimon ben Yochai transcribed the first work, official work of the Kabbalah, of the esoteric element of the Torah, which had again all been in tradition. The Zohar, which he wrote, had all been in tradition, although there were, according to some opinions, some earlier works, but not as major as his. As we know the story of Lag BaOmer, Rav Shimon Yochai, a man who was of the holiest of holy, passed away on Lag BaOmer. Many today, we have to understand Lag BaOmer for what it is. What makes Lag BaOmer? Why Rav Shimon ben Yochai? There are 500,000 approximately of Jews who come to the tomb of Rav Shimon ben Yochai. Many of them don't know why they're coming there. And what is Lag BaOmer? Why is it such a celebration? Rav Shimon ben Yochai was the one who gave us, who transcribed the mystical parts of the Torah, on which everything is based, on which the Kabbalah afterwards is based on, what the Chassidus is taken from, everything that is an entire segment of the Torah that is his credit, that is to his credit that we have. He was sort of the father, the Moses of the esoteric parts of the Torah, and it is to that reason why Lag BaOmer is such a celebration. It's the day of his Yortzeit, which he said should be a happy day, a sad day, but it is reason as to why, what makes Lag BaOmer the day that it is. Again, that's where everything was going on at the time. Next week, we're going to speak how in the days of Antoninus of Ant, a man called Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Judah the Prince. He's commonly referred to just Rabbi, just as Rabbi. Okay, he was the one who transcribed the oral law and thus put everything official, put everything into writing, and they've set the stage for Jewish survival and the survival of Judaism until today. And we're going to learn many terms of the era that he lived. Again, wasn't an easy era, but just one last thing. We're told on the day Rabbi Akiva was killed in such a brutal way, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Judah the Prince, was born. In other words, the Jews, Rabbi Akiva, the Jewish sages were being killed one after the next. And Hashem said, Hashem takes care. Hashem makes the cure before the damage, before the pain. Hashem makes that, as the verse says, the sun will rise and the sun will set. Every time the sun sets, the sun rises again. There's one sun that may set, but another sun that is eventually in the making. A new day will come, and the Jews will forever survive. That was the interesting contrast. And next week we'll get into that, a major phase in Judaism, the transcription of the oral law and everything that came with it.
Those are called amoebas. You can only see them through a microscope. Right now, there's a funding crisis in public schools. Donors chooses a nonprofit that lets youth.
We're at the point where in the travel through Jewish history, we're up to HaKadosh. Rabbi HaKadosh, literally, our holy master. He's also known as plain Rabbi. If you say in the yeshiva world, Rabbi, who is Rabbi? Rabbi is a reference to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who is known as Judah the Prince. Judah the Prince. He, if we want to list, 20, 30 characters among the Jewish people, to press hard.
Your feet all
Go press. If you want to list 20, 30 characters among the Jewish people who made a tremendous difference, who made an unbelievable shift in everything Jewish, he will definitely be one of them. Up until the times of Rabbeinu HaKodesh, up until the times of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the oral law, the Torah Shebaal Peh, was transmitted from rabbi to student, from Moshe to Joshua, from Joshua to the one who came after him, and so on. But it was round about 100 years or so, a little more, after the destruction of the Second Temple, which we've been talking. We spoke last week that Rabbi Akiva lived in the time of basically the aftermath of the destruction of the Temple. He had a student called Reb Meir, who we spoke about last week, who was the generation after him. And after that generation came the generation which we will mark as the generation of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. He came more or less. Again, this is roughly, but we mark the generations by their grade. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi realized that something had to be done. The oral Torah was at risk, it was in peril of being forgotten. And what he did is he got together everybody, all the sages of the generation, and wrote down in a concise form, wrote down the oral Torah. Now, this is something very, very key, very important. And it's so important because what identifies us as Jews today, what we have the Torah, we have the Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah on its own, it is what it is. We understand whatever we understand of it, but that's very little, especially when it comes to the actual mitzvahs, as we've described many times. And the transcribing of the oral Torah was a hallmark, was a time when the Jewish people kind of received maybe even a new, they had now something they were able to learn. And wherever they may be, they may be in Morocco, they may have been in Egypt, they may have been in Babylon, they may have gone and been dispersed anywhere in the world, they were now able to set up communities, they were now able to be Jews, as Jews should be, because now they had the oral Torah written down. Now, what we're going to refer now, we're going to actually go through, I want to be able to go through all of it. The one who did the most brilliant job of running through the history of the oral Torah up until now, Maimonides was the Rabbi. Maimonides, in his book, the Mishnah Torah, to his magnum opus, to his great book, where he codifies the entire Torah, the mitzvahs of the entire Torah, he goes through the history of the oral law. So we called this evening, we called it on email, we said, people get very skeptic. People get, what's this, we just blindly rely on this, what it says here and what it says there. Well, where is this all coming from? The Rambam knew of this, and many other sages knew and wrote down such things. But one who did a mega job, and a pretty short one, it was only a few pages, was the Rambam. And he goes through the unbroken chain and much of the history, which we'll learn inside here. We'll constantly refer back to this. The introduction of the Rambam, and we'll see just how all this comes together. The Rambam starts his introduction in the name of Hashem, the Lord of the world, and he starts with a verse, "Then I will not be ashamed when I gaze at all of your mitzvahs." It's a verse, but the Rambam uses this verse to all of the mitzvahs because he's about now to write down the details of all the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs given to Moses at Mount Sinai were all given together with their explanations, as implied by the verse, "And I will give you the tablets of stone, the Torah, and the mitzvah." It seems to be redundant. I'll give you the tablets of stone, the Torah. All right, the Torah, well, that's done. What's the mitzvah? So he explains. The Torah refers to the written law. The mitzvah to its explanation. God commanded us to fulfill the Torah according to the instructions of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is called the oral law. Here the pasuk, the verse, refers to as the mitzvah, not in the conventional sense, but in the sense of meaning the oral law. Moses, our teacher, personally transcribed the entire Torah before he died, the written Torah, that is. He gave a Torah scroll to each tribe and placed another scroll in the ark as a testimonial. As the verse states, take this Torah scroll and place it beside the ark, and it will be there as a testimonial. So the written Torah was given to every tribe and put in the ark. There was no change. The mitzvah, i.e. the explanation of the Torah, he did not transcribe. Instead, he commanded it verbally to the elders, to Joshua, and to the totality of Israel. As the verse states, be careful to observe everything that I prescribe to you. Moshe, make sure you follow everything I'm telling you. For this reason, it's called the oral Torah. So that's how things started off. Even though the oral Torah was not transcribed, Moses, our teacher, taught it in its entirety to his court, to the 70 elders. We know the Torah said there were 70 elders. The Torah says that there was a time when Moses couldn't handle it. Jews were complaining, and Hashem said, can't handle it, we'll give you, Hashem said, appoint yourself 70 elders, which was the beginning of the Sanhedrin. Now, who were the main ones out of those 70 elders? Elazar, Pinchas, and Joshua received the tradition from Moses. Elazar being the son of Aaron, Pinchas the son of Elazar, the grandson of Aaron, and Joshua the next leader. In particular, Moses transmitted the oral law to Joshua, who was his primary disciple, and instructed him regarding it. Similarly, throughout the life of Joshua, throughout his life, Joshua taught the oral law. Many elders received the tradition from him. Eli received the tradition from the elders and from Pinchas. Here, Maimonides is kind of jumping. There was to see Eli. Samuel received the tradition from Eli and his court. David received the tradition from Samuel and his court. Here he's just going down the line. Achiel of Shiloh was one of those who experienced the exodus of Egypt. He was a Levite and heard teachings from Moses as a child. He was, however, of low stature in Moses' age. He was actually very young. He lived very long. Afterwards, he received the tradition from David and his court. Elijah received the tradition from Achiel of Shiloh and his court. Elisha received the tradition from Elijah and his court. Yehoiada, the priest, received the tradition from Elisha and his court. Zechariah received the tradition from Yehoiada and his court. Hosea received the tradition from Zechariah and his court. Amos received the tradition from Hosea and his court. Isaiah received the tradition from Amos and his court. Micha received the tradition from Isaiah and his court. Yoel, these are all prophets, by the way. All these names are prophets in the Tanakh. What is the court referred to? The court refers to one of them had the son about the ages.
So, I mean, does every court have the same number of people?
Generally, yes, 70. 71 with the elder who was the leader. So Yoel received the tradition from Micha and his court, Nachum, Ezra. This is the rebuilding of Ezra and his court received the tradition from Baruch and his court. The members of Ezra's court are referred to as the Anshe Knesses Hagadolah, the men of the Great Assembly. We went through them. They included Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, these were the last prophets, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were famous. They were saved from the burning furnace that Nebuchadnezzar threw them into. Nehemiah ben Hakaliah, he was the contemporary of Ezra. Mordechai, the linguist. That's one of the names that Mordechai has, that the Rabbi refers to him. We know that Mordechai was a linguist, and that's how the whole Purim story happened, because he knew the language that those people were talking. Zerubbabel, who was the leader of the first ascent to Israel after the Jews had been exiled to Babylon, and many other sages, 120 elders in all. Now, as we know, that's what the Rambam makes note of them, because as we mentioned, the Anshe Knesset Haggadah really established many things in their day. For example, the davening, the text of the davening, the many other institutions that they made that would establish. He makes a big stage over here out of it. The last surviving member of this group was Shimon the Just, Simon the Just, Shimon HaTzadik. He was included among the 120 elders who received the oral law from all of them. He served as high priest after Ezra. Antigonus of Socho and received the tradition from Shimon the Just. Yosef ben Yoezer of Tzereda, Yosef ben Yochanan of Jerusalem, and their court received the tradition from Antigonus and his court. Yoshua ben Perachia and Nitai of Arbel, and their court received the tradition from Yosef ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Perachia and their court. This, by the way, this list over here that he's going to do now is listed in the first chapter of Ethics of the Fathers, of Pirkei Avos. If you look at the first chapter, besides being a very nice, bunch of aphorisms, each Mishnah, each paragraph in that first chapter is another link in the next generation. Okay? It starts off Shimon HaTzadik, the second Mishnah. Shimon HaTzadik, Antigonus is Socha, and so on and so forth until you reach Hillel and Shammai, going through a few hundred years. So it gives you a piece of every generation. That's how the first chapter of the Ethics of the Fathers, if you look at it. So he's going to go through this list. Yehuda ben Taba and Shimon ben Shattach, and their court received the tradition from Yeshua ben Prachia and Nita of Arbel, and their court Shmai and Avtalion, who were righteous converts. The Rambam learns that they were actually converts, and their court received the tradition from Yehuda and Shimon and their court. Hillel and Shammai, and their court received the tradition from Shmai and Avtalion and their court. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Shimon, the son of Hillel the elder, received the tradition from Hillel and Shammai and their courts. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the leader of the people at this time of the Roman times, at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. Okay, so we're close now to the time we're talking here. Rabbi Yochanan had 5 students who were great sages and received the tradition from him. They were Rabbi Loza the Great, that's what he was called, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Yosef the priest, Ben Sanel, and Rabbi Lo. Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, Rabbi Akiva, received from Rabbi Loza the Great. He's called Rabbi Lezer HaGodol. Yosef, his father, was a righteous convert. And the Rambam again, Maimonides is very good at doing this. He said the brilliance of the Rambam, you should know, just in the yeshiva world, is the simplicity which he just lays things out. Rambam doesn't get into any discussion. The book on which most Jewish discussion is based on is the Rambam. If you go to yeshiva world, you'll find shelves of books on the Rambam, because the Rambam just, everybody is, if you look at something in the Talmud, everybody is grappling, everybody doesn't know this, that, the other. The Rambam just puts it out nicely and smoothly and leaves you to find the source, which he doesn't write. And we had a question, it's a historical question. The son of convert, so his grandfather's father, Rambam said he was a convert. Now, go bang your head, that's the way you know it from. But the Rambam said it. The Rambam sort of smooths many things out like that. Rabbi Yishmael Erev Meir, a son of righteous converts, received it to Rabbi Akiva. So we see Rabbi Meir was the next generation. Rabbi Meir and his colleagues also received the tradition from Rabbi Yishmael. The colleagues of Rabbi Meir include Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Nehemiah, Rabbi Loza ben Shammua, Rabbi Yochanan the shoemaker, I'll tell you about him in a second, Shimon ben Azai, and Rabbi Hanina ben Tradya. Rabbi Yochanan the shoemaker is buried, if you've ever been to Meron, Rabbi Shimon ben Yechai, he's buried down the street, down the hill. He was a shoemaker. The Rambam makes mention, when the Rambam speaks of the laws of Torah, the Rambam says that many of the most ultimately greatest of sages were very simple craftsmen. They refused to use their Torah as making a living, although they maybe could have. Many of them were very poor. Hillel was a wood chopper. A wood chopper, and at times he suffered tremendous poverty. And Rabbi Yochanan, he was a shoemaker, and he's one of the greatest. He's buried not far from Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Similarly, Rabbi Akiva's colleagues also received the tradition from Rabbi Elazar the Great. Rabbi Akiva's colleagues include Rabbi Tarfon, the teacher of Rabbi Yosef Galil, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Gamliel the elder received the tradition from Rabbi Shimon, his father, the son of Hillel the elder. Rabbi Shimon, his son, received the tradition from him. Rabbi Gamliel, his son, received the tradition from him, and Rabbi Shimon, his son, received the tradition from him. You see the name Shimon and Gamliel repeating themselves. They named after each other. But there's a rule there's a rule which we know. The Rambam also rules this way, that if there's a position among Jewish people and the son is worthy enough of taking that position, then he has right for it first. And that's why you'll see, many of these generations, there may have been tremendously great people who were the same generation. How did they decide who was going to be who's going to be the head, who's going to be the head of the yeshiva? Well, the first one was, if his son was the one before son was worthy enough, then he had it. That's the rule. Last paragraph. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon, referred to as Rabbeinu HaKodesh, our saintly teacher, received the tradition from his father, from Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, and from Rabbi Shimon and his colleagues. Okay, if you can memorize all that, say it backwards, you got it. Gamliel and Shimon a few times and you get it, right?
So in that case, because I missed it, so the father and son had the same name, they both living?
No, grandfather, yeah. Rabbeinu HaKodesh composed the Mishnah. From the days of Moses, our teacher, until Rabbeinu HaKodesh, no one had composed a text for the purpose of teaching the oral law in public. Instead, in each generation, the head of the court, or the prophet of that generation, would take notes of the teachings which he received from his masters for himself, and teach them verbally in public. Similarly, according to his own potential, each individual would write notes for himself of what he heard regarding the explanation of the Torah, its laws, and the new concepts that were discussed in each generation concerning the laws that were not communicated by oral tradition, but rather deducted from one of the 13 principles of biblical, that next word I don't know what it is. Exegesis? I saw like it. What is that? Learning out from, I think.
It's from the media.
Yeah?
The explanations.
Okay. Accepted by the High Court. Let me just explain that. In other words, he said, what does he say? He said, everybody wrote down what had come into tradition from the oral Torah, its laws, and new concepts that were deduced in each generation, not directly communicated in the Torah, the oral tradition, but deduced using one of the 13 principles of biblical explanation, biblical deduction that we have. Now, what are they? This is also very important. In many sidurim, right before Hodu, when we start the service, you will find that we say there's a page that's called the Brisa of Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Shmuel says, Bishlosh Esrei Midos HaTorah can be expounded upon using 13 principles. Now, what these are, I'll give you the first one. Kal v'chomer. Kal means light, literally. Not light as in lightweight. Chomer means heavy. Light and heavy. What it means is, if you have a law which is a heavy law, meaning a law which is stated in a certain case, which is more stringent than another given case. For example, the Torah says a not marry a grandchild, a granddaughter. The Torah have relationships with, which, the Torah doesn't actually state that one cannot do such a thing with a daughter. So someone's going to come along and say, wait. So the first one of the 13 principles of the Torah, of deducing the Torah, is kal v'chomer. If a law was said in a lightweight case, in a less stringent case, the law obviously applies in a more stringent case. Now, not all of those are as obvious as I just made it. That's a very big one. Okay? That's a very big one. But that now, another one, I'll give you another example. The next law is Gezeira Shava. Gezeira Shava means a verse which uses equal terminology in two cases. A word or a few words which the Torah will use in a certain case and uses the same terminology regarding another case, from which we can learn some rules that apply in that case number one that we know apply there, also apply in case number two, because the Torah used equal terminology. Now, these are principles which are used, but have to be very carefully analyzed. You can't, not every Tom, Dick, and Harry can go and say, oh, well, I'll juxtapose this to that, the pasuk uses this wording, that wording, we can know where all that will go. That's why he said that in each generation, there were these principles were used. Now, these principles were given to Moses, and the Torah was always learnt and using these principles. However, these principles had to be brought to Sanhedrin. The Torah tells us that the Sanhedrin in each generation, they are the end all of opinion. The buck stops there, and if they discussed it and agreed that this is a true deduction or a learning out of, then the Torah itself says that that's the law. And in any given generation, you'll see in the Talmud, if you learn a bit of Gemara, you'll see that this is constantly, we're learning things out of a verse. It's a very great principle. Not everything was dictated by oral tradition, officially. Some things we learn out of verses. There are principles of how you learn a verse. What you can or cannot do. Even if you do follow the principles, it has to go through the pipeline of Jewish decision, which was, and then when the Sanhedrin will decide that this is a valid, so people wrote down everything that they had heard and that had been new in previous generations. Second paragraph. This situation continued until the age of Rabbeinu HaKodesh. And all the explanations and commentaries that were heard from Moses, our teacher, and which were taught by the courts in each generation concerning the entire Torah. From all this, he composed the text of the Mishnah. He taught it to the sages in public and revealed it to those who all wrote it down. They spread it in all places so that the oral law would not be forgotten by the Jews. Why did Rabbeinu HaKodesh make such an innovation instead of perpetuating the status quo? Asks the Rambam. Why did he decide to do this? Because he saw the students becoming fewer. New difficulties constantly arising. The Roman Empire spreading itself throughout the world and becoming more powerful, and the Jewish people and becoming dispersed to the far ends of the world. Therefore, he composed a single text that would be available to everyone, would be studied quickly and would not be forgotten. Throughout his entire life, he and his court taught the Mishnah to the masses. Okay? So this is the stage of Rabbeinu HaKodesh. We know him as Rabbeinu HaKodesh or Rabbi. Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi. Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi. His character himself is recorded in many places in the Gemara. He was an all-rounder. He was from the house of David, so that immediately got him tremendous respect. He was tremendously wealthy, very wealthy man. He was tremendously scholarly and It was everything going full. Saw him as the ultimate leader. Towards the end of the life, towards the end of his life, actually, he was on his deathbed. The Gemara says he raised his 10 fingers to my life. Have I had enjoyment? Have I had pleasure from the wealth that I had? He was very wealthy, but he never let himself indulge. He said in his day, every day of the year, he had salad on the table. In those days, that means if it was winter, you were bringing vegetables from I don't know where. You're bringing lettuce. The Gemara tells us which vegetables were all on his table every day of the year. It wasn't an issue for him. That's how wealthy he was in those days.
But he wasn't spreading it around.
He didn't take it in. He didn't sit there and enjoy it. That's what he would. That's what he testified on himself, that I never enjoyed anything that I actually owned. Towards the end of his life, he was inflicted with very great disease, which caused him a lot of pain. Rabbi was also very friendly with the Roman emperor, who was called Antony. The argument which Antony exactly it was, two, but he was very friendly with him. Antoninus. This Antoninus guy was maybe a little different, or very different than many of the Roman emperors. He was a scholar, he was a philosopher, and he loved Rabbi. The story was of how their friendship started was that the Romans, in the time when Rabbi was born, was the era of Rabbi Akiva. We said that the day Rabbi Akiva was killed was the day that Rabbi was born. At that time, the Romans had forbidden it, including bris milah. There was death penalty for anybody who would make a bris. Who was the wife of the sage of he was before. She didn't think she made a bris, and the Romans found out, and they summoned them to Rome. They had to travel to Rome, where they knew basically what was awaiting them. On the way, they stopped off in an inn, in a hotel. And there was over there a Roman lady, who seemed to be a very nice lady. And she asked the mother, Rabbi, where are you going? She said, I'm going to Rome. What are you going to Rome for? It's a nice Jewish lady going to Rome. She said, well, this is the deal. This is what we've been summoned. She was very compassionate, this lady, and she said, you know something? I have a baby which is exactly the same age as yours. Let's switch. We'll make a switch. We come back. He's not circumcised, obviously. You go to Rome, you see they'll tell you the whole thing is phony, and you'll come back and everything right. And she did. She went, they showed the baby, the emperor was furious with whoever gave him this false accusation, the baby wasn't circumcised, he did away with them. What are you lying to me for? The leader of the Jews is a good Roman guy, everything is fine, and he sent them back. When they switched, that baby became Antony, became the emperor. So the kind of bond between Rabbi and Antoninus started when they were babies. And there's many stories in the Gemara who go on about the friendship and the bond between the two of them. He trusted them ultimately, and the benefit of that was an era of peace for the Jewish people. Was an era they were able to breathe in the time of Antony. Anyhow. Now, let's see a little bit further. These are the great sages who were part of the court of Rabbeinu HaKodesh and received the tradition from him. His sons, Shimon and Gamliel, again the name repeating himself, Rabbi Ofes, Rabbi Chanina ben Chama, Rabbi Chia, Rav, Rabbi Yanai, Bar Kafra, Bar Kapora, Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Hoshaya. Now these are all names which are household names in any yeshiva, and these are all repeated hundreds of times. Thousands and myriads of other sages received the tradition from Rabbeinu HaKodesh together with these. Received the tradition from Rabbeinu HaKodesh and ended his studies. There are differences between them. In other words, there were still questions. It's eternal. There's always a Mishnah, but what if the case differs a little bit? What do we do then? There were differences. Rav received from Rabbi Hanina ben Chama. The Rama was going to say this, and we'll soon get there. The Mishnaic period, the period of the Mishnah, is what we call the period of the Tanoim. Tana, or Tana, means to learn, or to learn in front of people. There are two terms that are very important, Tana and Amora. Tana means the learner, the studier, the one who teaches. Those refer to all the sages, basically from the era of the Second Temple to a little bit after Rabbeinu HaKadosh, or around his time, a few hundred years. What unites them? What unites them is that they are all the ones quoted in the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva, all these people, Rabbi Meir, Bar Kapara, Bar Kapara, yeah. You have all the rabbis. They are identified, by the way, for the most part, as Rabbi. If you talk about Rabbi somebody, okay, you're talking about a Tana. You're talking about somebody who had joined in the Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Hanina, Rabbi Yehuda. All these people are referred to as Rabbi. The next term which we need to learn is Tana, and then there's Amora. Amora is somebody who came after Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and they're the ones quoted in the Talmud. Amora comes from the word Omar, to say, to speak. They spoke over what the Tanoim, what the Tana, what they wrote or what they said. They spoke it over. They discussed it. Important Amoraim are Abaya, Rova, Rav Yosef, all the Ravs, Rav Chisda, Rav Huna. Rebbe, generally, is a Tana. Rav, something, is an Amora. Okay? What's the difference between them is Rebbe is Hebrew, Rav is Aramaic. The Mishnah is written in Hebrew. The Gemara and the Talmud is written in Aramaic for the most part.
So there is no difference. It's just the
term, correct. The Mishnah was written in Israel. The Talmud Bavli, Babylonian Talmud, was written in Babylon. The Talmud Yerushalmi, you will find many rabbis, because the Jerusalem Talmud was written in a place where you called Rabbi. Okay? But since we follow mostly the Talmud Bavli, we can use this divider of Rabbi and Rav. Rabbi is the one who are Tanoim, the ones who composed the Mishnah. Ravs are the ones who composed the Gemara.
I don't remember in Rockaway when one of the rabbis gets called to the Torah. Don't they call him his name by Rav such and such?
Rav. Today you would see. It's interesting. Today you would, when you call a rabbi, you would say Harav Goldberg, which is Rabbi Goldberg. The Rav.
Yeah, that's what I was.
For many people, in most cases, you will call someone Harav, the rabbi. It's interesting, the word Rebbe was often reserved for Hasidic Rebbes. Rebbe was Rebbe Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. So it might have been that was sort of the, Harav, maybe a rabbi of a kehillah, or the rabbi of a community, or the Rosh Hashiva. Somebody who was more of a holy nature. It could be, I'm not saying that this is with a fact, but something more of a holy nature. A Rebbe was referred to with the Rebbe name. That could be possible. Now, there's two names over here which are very important. Rav and Shmuel. The end of the line is Rav. The middle of the next line is Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel were really important, and because they were the ones who were sort of the bridge between the Mishnah and the Gemara. The rule was, or is, that someone who composed the Gemara, the Talmud, cannot argue with somebody who is a Tana. An Amora can never argue with a Tana. The Tanoim wrote down the Mishnah. What they said was true. That was the tradition. You can't argue with the tradition. You can't argue with what they wrote down. You can discuss it. You can figure out what they meant. You can't argue with it. They were the ones who joined in writing the oral tradition. Rav was the bridge. And the Talmud says that Rav, on some occasions, does argue with a Tana because he could have been also to be considered a Tana. He was of that nature that the Mishnah sort of was still in the making until the cut-off line. Anyhow, Rav, the next three paragraphs in the end, Rav composed the Sifra and Sifrei to explain the sources for the Mishnah. Rabbi composed the Tosefta to explain the subjects discussed in the Mishnah. Rabbi Hoshaya and Bar Kafre, calls him over here, composed the Brises to explain the matters discussed in the Mishnah. Books were authored to explain the Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan composed the Jerusalem Talmud in Eretz Yisrael approximately 300 years after the destruction of the temple. Okay? The Jerusalem Talmud was composed, I believe, about 100 years before the Babylonian Talmud. So what do we see here? Right after the Mishnah, the next generation already, Rav and Shmuel, they were already writing books to explain the sources and to expound upon the Mishnah. The Mishnah is very, very concise. If you open the Mishnah, the wording is like a verse. It uses such concise wording that you can dig out. So it was written brilliantly, and many books were written for the layman and just to discuss where they're getting it from, which verse. There's almost none of that in the Mishnah to tell you where and from what and all that. It was just a record of the actual law. Books written, Sifra, Sifrei, Tosefta. All these books are available today, which explain us what the Mishnah is talking about. The first Talmud, which was written, which was a collection of a major collection of all the discussion, was written in Jerusalem by Rabbi Yochanan. This is not Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. There were a number of Rabbi Yochanans. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's time of the destruction. This is 300 years later. This Rabbi Yochanan is interesting. There are many stories about all these people, but Rabbi Yochanan was the one who wrote the Jerusalem Talmud. He had a brother-in-law who was called Reb Shimon ben Lakish. He's known as Reish Lakish. He'll have hundreds of times. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish had a discussion. Rabbi Yochanan, the Talmud, again, everybody major, the Talmud devotes a lot to their life story as well. Rabbi Yochanan suffered tremendously. He was the composer of Jerusalem Talmud. Rabbi Yochanan had 10 sons and he lost every one of them in his lifetime. And it says that Rabbi Yochanan carried on him a tooth from his youngest son. And when he would go to a shiva house, he would show them and say, I've been there, sort of thing. That was Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was a tremendously handsome man. And it says, interestingly, that in his spare time, in the time he was tired from learning, the Gemara says, he would sit by the mikveh in the evening. Although this is not something which is done ever, he would sit by the mikveh, and we know the significance of when a woman walks out of the mikveh, of the conceiving that she has. There's a great significance of what she watches and what she looks at that time. And this is the source for in the Gemara that he would sit by the mikveh, and in order that the women should meet him, sort of thing, should see him on that night. In other words, in the Rebbe once commented, this is what a sage of Israel does when he's tired. In other words, he's sleep on the couch. He's thinking, what can I do that doesn't involve so much effort to better the Jewish people? That's what it is. The most interesting one was Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish was the brother-in-law of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and they were loggerheads all the time, always arguing over the Gemara. This is how everything was created. Reish Lakish, his history was that he was an outlaw. He was a highwayman. Reish Lakish was a mighty fella. Very says that Rabbi Yochanan was very handsome. Rabbi Yochanan was standing on the other end of a river. Reish Lakish was on the opposite side. Reish Lakish thought that this handsome he was a she. So what he did was he started playing gymnastics to impress the sheep. He did all somersaults and everything, and in the end, he jumped over the width of the river. He was so tough. He gets to the other end, and he sees that the she is a he. Anyway, all that wasted effort. So Rabbi Yochanan didn't flinch. Rabbi Yochanan, he realized that this young chap has a lot of potential. He very soon learn. I have a sister, and if you behave and if you get to the right places, I'll arrange a shidduch. Reish Lakish saw Rabbi Yochanan, he was taken by him, and he agreed. It says Reish Lakish tried to jump over the river, the width again, and he couldn't manage. Immediately, as soon as he made that decision to learn, to behave, his physical might a little bit left him, it was broken. He delved into the Torah with the same strength that he had, and became Reish Lakish, the counterpart of Rabbi Yochanan, and became his brother. And so Rabbi Yochanan, after Reish Lakish passed away, was never the same. He said he didn't have anybody to talk to. He said, everybody else, he said, yes people, they're all nodding their heads, yeah, or whatever you say. Reish Lakish was this tougher, would clash with him. That was the history of Reish Lakish, how he turned around his stamina to Torah. Anyway.
Controversial things down about people, of course.
Yeah.
Does it ever with how a person of that stature would have such suffering?
This is the question of all generations. It's not for tonight. This is a shir. This is a shir, a separate shir. But
they're obviously not perfect, but of such stature.
There is. That wasn't punished. Something else. That's a whole separate. We won't do just if we just comment. Anyway. The second class from Rabbi Shmuel, that this is Rabbi Shmuel, were the Rosh Hashivas in Bavel, in Babylon. We're going backwards and forwards from Israel to Babylon. This is Babylon now. Who received the tradition from Rabbi Shmuel was Rav Huna, you see all the Ravs, Rav Yehuda, Rav Nachman, Rav Kahana. Among the great sages who received the tradition from Rabbi Yochanan was Rabba Babachana, Rav Ami, Rav Asi, Rav Dimi, and Rav Ovin. Now, the reason why they're called Rav is because they moved to Bavel. They moved to Babylon. They took from Rabbi Yochanan, because what happened was, we must realize that after the destruction of the temple, if you would want to have it on a graph, the population in Israel was going on an immediate down, year by year, especially after the death of Rabbeinu HaKodesh. In the days of Rabbeinu HaKodesh, the Roman Empire was very kind to them, and the Israel that was under the Roman Empire was doing very well under it. After Rabbeinu HaKodesh passed, there was sort of no reason to be there. No Beis HaMikdash, no Rabbeinu HaKodesh, no sage. So what for? What are we still doing here? And the Jews slowly but surely started moving to Babylon. 3 out of 4 Jewish people, after Rabbeinu HaKodesh passed away, slowly but surely made their way to Bavel. So many went to Spain. This was the beginning of the migration. To Spain, they must have, the historians say at that time they must have gone also to Germany and to France, or at least they visited there. They that was the beginning when everything started germinating of the Jewish presence in these countries, because there was nothing to be in Israel for. Yerushalayim was destroyed. It was in ruins. It was very difficult to live there. You're in the Galil. What was in the Galil? So that's how things happened. Whereas in Babylon, at the time, there was a very huge and strong Jewish community. There were yeshivas. There were. We'll get to Babylon. There was entire cities which were Jewish. They had their own sort of monarchy. There was the Reish Galusa, the famous idea of a Reish Galusa, who was to be given autonomy by the Babylonian Empire to run all the Jewish affairs. He had extreme power. So this was the place to be. This was the Brooklyn. This was this was the yeshivas. The great people were there. These were yeshivas that were founded by Ezekiel 700 years earlier. Surah, which was a yeshiva, was the yeshiva of Raz, was founded by Ezekiel. These was history places, and this is where the people migrated. So last paragraph, among the sages who received addition from Rav Huna and Rabbi Yehuda were Rabbi and Rav Yosef. Among the sages who received addition from Rabbi and Rav Yosef were Abaya and Rava. You won't find 2-3 pages in the Talmud without mentioning these people. Abaya, Rava, Rabbi, Rav Yosef, these are household names. Both of them also received a tradition from Rav Nachman. Among the sages who received tradition from Rava were Rav Ashi and Ravina. Mar bar Rav Ashi received a tradition from Rav Ashi, his father, and from Ravina. Now this is the end of the line. Mar bar Rav Ashi and Ravina. They were the ones who wrote down the Talmud. Okay, so we've come full circle, and here comes the list that we were using. The list I was using was directly from the introduction of the Rambam. There were 40 generations from Rav Ashi back to Moses, our teacher, blessed memory. They were. Now, what we do, full line. Rav Ashi, Rava, Rabba, Rav Huna, Rav Yechanan, Rabbeinu HaKodesh. You see now there were 6 generations between the Talmud and Rav Ashi and Rabbeinu HaKodesh who wrote the Mishnah. Rab Shimon, Rabbi Gamliel, Rab Shimon, Rabbi Gamliel, Rab Shimon, Hillel and Shammai, Shmai and Naftalian, Yehuda and Shimon, Yeshua and Nitai, Yosef ben Yezer and Yosef ben Yochanan, Antigonus, Shimon the Just, Ezra, Baruch, Jeremiah, Tzfanya, Habakkuk, Nahum, Yoel, Micha, Isaiah, Amos, Hosea, Zechariah, Yehoiada, Elisha, Elijah, Achia, David, Samuel, Eli, Pinchas, Joshua, and Moses. Okay? This is the source for everything.
Did rabbinical ordination begin with
Smicha.
Yeah.
Okay, the way we mentioned this last time, I mentioned it again, it's important. Oh, you said, okay. That's an interesting phenomenon. You wouldn't go in front of Moses and call them Moses. Yeah, we refer to Moshe Rabbeinu. All the bigger, Elijah, Elisha, right? I was actually thinking about it today. There are those that give reason, others that don't. When did the Rav or Rabbi start? Okay, where do you find the first one?
Number 11, I think. It's the last one that you were.
Rabbi, Hillel and Shammai. You're right. Yeah. I don't have an actual reason. Although, if I may assume, it might be because there's no need. If you in a generation where things are obvious, then there's no need for titles. You understand? If somebody with his mere stature, if you said, Zechariah, then Zechariah is Zechariah. Isaiah is Isaiah. There's no Isaiah number 2. When the generations diminish, you need titles, right? Today everybody throws around titles, right? This guy is this and this guy is that, because you need the title.
So the title Moshe Rabbeinu is something that we use, but it's not likely that they refer to him that way. That if Darren will speak to him or somebody else.
Actually, interestingly enough, now that I'm thinking of it, I believe there is reference in the Gemara that somebody referred to Rabbeinu Moshe, our teacher Moshe. So that was, whether it was Rabbeinu Yehoshua, I'm not sure. Don't remember if there's such a thing, but it's very interesting. Thus, the source of all these people's knowledge is God, the Lord of Israel. This is how the Maimonides puts it all together. All the sages who were mentioned were the leaders of the generations. Among them were the heads of the academies, the Rosh Yeshiva, heads of the exile, the Reish Golusa, and members of the great Sanhedrin. Together with them in each generation, there were thousands and myriads who heard these teachings. We're just naming one, says the Rambam. That's important to understand. Ravina and Rav Ashi were the final generations of the sages of the Talmud. Rav Ashi composed the Babylonian Talmud in Shinar, which is another name for Babylon, a biblical name actually for Babylon, Shinar, approximately 100 years after Rabbi Yochanan composed the Jerusalem Talmud. The intent of both of the Talmuds is to elucidate the words of the Mishnah, to explain its deeper points, and to relate the new matters that were developed by each court from the era of Rabbeinu HaKodesh until the composition of the Talmud. New things came up. Okay? From the entire body of knowledge stemming from the two Talmuds, the Tosefta, the Sifra, and the Sifrei, which were the books written right after the Mishnah, can be derived the forbidden and the permitted, the impure and the pure, liable and those who are free from liability, the invalid and the valid, as was received in tradition, one person from another, in a chain extending back to Moses at Mount Sinai. Also, the sources mentioned above, this is important, relate those matters which were decreed by the sages and prophets in each generation in order to build a fence around the Torah. Now what that means is, there were rules which were created by the sages, and you want to build a fence around the cliff. A famous example is the example of muktzah. On Shabbos, we're not supposed to handle certain things. You're not supposed to handle a pen. Now the Torah doesn't say, it's not part of the oral tradition that you're not supposed to handle a pen. Why don't we handle a pen on Shabbos? Because it may come to right. Handling a pen, you'll come to right. That was something that the sages decreed, and the Torah gave authority for the sages to decree. Hanukkah, Purim, these are not fences, but these are new things. But still, the Torah gives authority for the sages, but it must be all the sages, to decree. We were explicitly taught about this practice by Moses, as implied by Leviticus, and you shall observe my precepts, which can be interpreted to mean, make safeguards for my precepts. That means, asu mishmeres na mishmart in Hebrew works much better. Make a guard for my precepts. Similarly, it includes the customs and ordinances which were ordained and practiced in each generation according to the judgment of the governing court of that generation. For example, Purim, Hanukkah. There were new things, novel things, that obviously are not from the Torah. It is forbidden to deviate from these decisions, as implied by the verse, do not deviate from the instructions that they will give you, left or right. Now, this is very important. In other words, the Torah itself gives authority to the sages. If there is a consensus of the sages of the time, nobody now can create the Hanukkah or Purim because there is not a consensus of all the sages of the time. We don't have the authority, the power now to do that. But the Torah says, don't deviate from any of the instructions they'll give you. If they will convene and they will decide that something is supposed to be law, then that's the law. The Torah itself, in other words, it predicts the obvious. In any country, in any lawmaking, in any place that abides by laws, there will always be new situations. Yes, in the time of the Torah, there was no Hanukkah yet, there was no Purim yet, but Purim did happen and Hanukkah happened. So what do? So if the sages will come together and realize that this is something that needs to be done, so the Torah says they have the permission to make a Hanukkah, they have the permission to make Purim, they have permission to make laws which apply in certain cases. And this, by the way, is one of the, we all hear every 5 minutes the other discussion about the second day Yom Tov. Right? This is a big one. What's the business of the second day Yom Tov? The business is very simple. There's a Gemara. The Gemara says, what happened to the second day Yom Tov? The Sanhedrin would decide when the new moon would be, right? And the message did not necessarily get to all the places, right? In time, if the Pesach is on the 15th of the month, so wherever you can get to in 15 days, 14 days, you can get to. Wherever you can't, you can't. Rosh Hashanah, for example, you can't get anywhere. If today is the first day of the month, but the day is Rosh Hashanah, right? You're not going nowhere. It's Rosh Hashanah. So everybody who was out of range kept 2 days, because it was either Rosh Chodesh was either on day number 30, 29, 30 was Rosh Chodesh, or day number 31. It had to be either one of those two. It was never 32. The Torah says either 30 or 31, and then you make it. By go back, you make Rosh Chodesh. So everyone who was out of range kept 2 days. Out of doubt, because maybe Rosh Chodesh was day number 30, maybe Rosh Chodesh was day number 31. Rosh Hashanah, the whole Israel kept 2 days, because we were in doubt, because we didn't know what was going on in Jerusalem, right? Now comes along the Talmud and says that when the calendar was fixed. In other words, there was no Sanhedrin anymore, and we weren't fixing the days of the month according to the witnesses coming who saw the new moon. We were doing that. Now, because the Jews were dispersed, no Sanhedrin, no one to decide that now is Rosh Chodesh, so we make a calendar. We figure out when the moon will be seen. We announce it in Shul every Shabbos Mevorachim, when the moon will be seen in Jerusalem, and on that day, or around that day, wherever, it's a whole very complex thing of how the calendar works, but in principle, around then it's Rosh Chodesh and we make Rosh Chodesh. Okay? So seemingly now everybody knows when Rosh Chodesh is, everybody knows when the 15th day of the month is, so why keep 2 days Yom Tov, right? So the Gemara asks the question, and the Gemara says that in the day, there was a time, says the Gemara, when Babylon was able to find out when Rosh Chodesh was. And nevertheless, they told them, Hizaru b'minhag abeseichem b'yadechem. Be careful to keep the tradition of your fathers. The tradition of your parents was to keep 2 days Yom Tov. You have to carry on keeping 2 days Yom Tov. Now, why was this the case? Why was this the case? The sages of the time felt that this is something that had to be done. Reason being, if you have, there had to be borderlines. Meaning, let's say you had a case where there was a certain place where they did hear the news, another place they didn't hear. It wouldn't be clear. It wouldn't be clear cut. In other words, people, I came from Israel, so I kept 1 day Yom Tov. So when I go to, when I go to America, I'll also keep 1 day Yom Tov. Over there you don't know, when Yom Tov is. Pesach was always 1 day. We haven't made 2 Seders. We always made 1 Seder, right? The masses think that way. Masses don't delineate. Yeah, I'm in range. I'm not in range. They know what they did as a kid. Yeah? And it said, you keep if you're outside of Israel, that's when they made the borderlines. If you're inside Israel, where mostly that's where the message will, so then you keep 1 day Yom Tov. If you're outside of Israel, although the reasoning has gone away, keep 2 days Yom Tov. You're much safer that way. Now somebody will come along and say, well, we're 2,000 down the line. Today there's email. Today there's no such thing as you don't know. So today's the time to abolish it. So there's a law in the Torah that says that if you want to abolish something, the one who needs to abolish it must be greater in wisdom and in number than those who have issued it. Okay? Which means that in simple language, if you start to tamper, then you're going down a very dangerous path. If you have the stature, if we would have the position that they had then, of saying, you know something, this time, they had to do that then, so as not to forget, to keep up the custom of their fathers, good. But now, the reason doesn't apply. Can we abolish it? So the answer is no. Since the decree was made by those who are greater in stature, you cannot abolish it. Either reasoning went away. So the Torah knows the character of people, and the proof is in the pudding. Those who felt that they could, abrogate this law, although they're not as great, and the consensus of sages of the time is not as strong, nevertheless, okay, we'll keep 1 day Yom Tov. It doesn't stop there. Right? It doesn't stop there. It goes to things which are there's no reason to abolish, and you still abolish them. The Torah makes laws. This law can actually understand. In other words, the language in the Gemara is Yorda l'seif da'atei shel adam. The Torah penetrated down to the consciousness of people. The Torah is given by Hashem, and Hashem knows the way people work, and that's why there is the system of once it's in, it's not simple at all to abolish it. Now, that is on face value. If you're talking on the spiritual level, Hasidus explains why in the diaspora we must have 2 days of Yom Tov. Because it says that the holiness of Yom Tov takes more time, so to speak. It takes 2 days to penetrate that which in Israel takes 1 day. But if we're talking on the plane of law, the Torah sets, in other words, talking on the plane of spirituality, there is meaning in the 2 days of Yom Tov. It's not something hollow that we just do because we have no choice. But that is on the spiritual plane, which we're not talking about now, although it's very important. We're talking simply on the plane of law, talking about the court of law. There are rules that the Torah puts down that says that if the sages rule something, that's it. There's no moving from it. Although, if the rule was put down with a condition that if the reasoning goes away, then you're able to abolish it. Now, there's some rules are put down because of a reason. This and this was the reason. When this reason will go away, then the result of the law that results from it will also be able to go. Then good. There are some laws, however, that even though the reasoning went away, we still must keep. Because from a law perspective, once things are in, once the things are in, things are in. I always give the example. Is it imaginable today that somebody who claims, a male, who claims to follow Judaism should not wear a yarmulke, even in shul? Unconceivable, right? Is a yarmulke a law of the Torah? No. There's no law that says he must wear a yarmulke, he must wear a head covering. It starts in the Talmud, there's source for it in the Talmud, the Zohar speaks of it. Throughout the generations, it became a custom and a minhag which has the strength itself. Nobody today in the wildest dream will go and say, you know something, forget the yarmulke. Why not? Because it's so ingrained inside of the Jewish psyche that to tamper with that, everybody realizes we'll be tampering with the essence of Yiddishkeit. No yarmulke, so no yarmulke, so no tefillin. Well, people don't delineate. Tefillin, it says in the Torah. Yarmulke doesn't say that. I mean, someone says, I'll throw off my yarmulke, right? So you throw Shabbos and tefillin, and everything goes in a package deal. People don't think down that way. And that's why the Torah says, Minhag Yisrael Torah. A custom by Jews is Torah. You can't tamper with it. And the same thing with this. People go with the second day Yom Tov. If I had a 2 seders in my life, I kept Rosh Hashanah for 2 days, right? And Mitamol somebody comes along and says, something bumba. Well, we don't need that today, we have it, right? Oh, so I don't have to keep the second day seder. Maybe one day I won't have to keep the first day seder. Maybe I don't know. It's playable. And the Torah knows that. If Yiddishkeit can become playable, says Hashem, then you're not sure with anything. And in any country it works that way, simply by default. There are some things which are just stuck in the law books, which could very arguably be totally outrageous. But they're there. And if a policeman will catch you tampering with he'll agree with the policeman that it doesn't make sense. But that's the law. You can't play around with it. Once you play around with law, then it's hefker, as they say. Then there's no reins. The horse is free. And the Torah knew that. The difference is, as we said before, in the law of a country, it may not make sense, but that's the law. In the law of the Torah, and it's when the rabbis made something, when they made this decree and said the second day Yom Tov got to be kept irrelevant, they knew what they were talking about. On the spiritual plane, they understood that in Chutz La'aretz, in the diaspora, from a spiritual point of view, that needs to happen. Nothing is hollow when you describe. Nothing is just because. There's meaning to everything. That's the difference. But from a law perspective, that's the deal. So this is very important to understand the gravity of rabbinic law from the Torah. That paragraph also includes marvelous judgments and laws. The marvelous judgments and laws which were not received from Moses, but rather were derived by the courts of the latter generations based on the principles of biblical Okay. The elders of those generations made these decisions and concluded that this was the law. Rav Ashi included in the Talmud this entire body of knowledge stemming from the era of Moses, our teacher, until his own era. The sages of the Mishnah also composed other texts to explain the words of the Torah. Rabbi Shaya, the disciple of Rabbeinu HaKodesh, composed an explanation of the book of Genesis. Rabbi Yishmael composed an explanation beginning, these are the names, beginning with the book of Exodus, until the conclusion of the Torah. This is also called the Mechilta. Rabbi Akiva also composed a Mechilta, another book called Mechilta. Other sages of the following generations composed other collections of interpretations of verses, Midrashim, Medrash. All of these works were composed before the Babylonian Talmud. Thus, Ravina, Rav Ashi, and their colleagues represented the final era of the great sages of Israel who transmitted the oral law. They passed decrees, ordained practices, and put into effect customs. These decrees, ordinances, and customs spread out among the entire Jewish people in all the places where they lived. After the court arose the Talmud and completed it in the time of his son, Rav Ashi, the Jewish people became further dispersed throughout all the lands, reaching distant extremes and far-removed islands. Strife sprung up throughout the world, and the paths of travel became endangered by troops. Torah study decreased, and the Jews ceased entering their yeshivas in the thousands and myriads, as was customary previously. Instead, individuals, the remnant, whom God called, it's an aphorism, would gather in each city and country, occupy themselves in Torah study, and devote themselves to understanding the texts of the sages and learning the path of judgment from them. Every court that was established after the conclusion of the Talmud, regardless of the country in which it was established, issued decrees, enacted ordinances, and established customs for the people of that country, all those of several countries. These practices, however, were not accepted throughout the Jewish people because of the distance between their different settlements and the disruption of communication between them. One was the ban against polygamy, right? That was in the Ashkenazi world and not in the Sephardic world. So again, what we see over here is after the Talmud, after the Gemara, there was no consensus of all the Jewish sages. The Gemara is the end word. There's nothing. We cannot decree. Nobody can stand up and say, I'm making something for the entire Klal Yisrael. Well, the rabbi down the street doesn't agree with you, right? The Talmud, that's why the Talmud is so much learned, because everything needs to be drawn from the Talmud. This is what he says now. Since each of these courts were considered to be individuals, and the High Court of 71 judges had been defunct for many years before the composition of the Talmud, people in one country could not be compelled to follow the practices of another country, nor is one court required to sanction decrees which another court has declared in its locale. Similarly, if one of the Gaonim, and this was the period after the Talmud, was the Gaonim, we're going to learn about all this, but he's going further. One of the Gaonim interpreted the path of judgment in a certain way, while the court which arose afterward interpreted the proper approach to the matter in a different way. The opinion of the first need not be adhered to absolutely. Rather, whichever position appears to be correct, whether the first or the second, is accepted. Okay. So this is how things sort of got together, and the Rambam goes on as that basically the Talmud by the Gaonim was taught, and since the Talmud was written in Babylon, which was Aramaic, not everybody understood Aramaic, and so the Gaonim, the Gaon, the genius of the time, teach the people that Talmud. Each one of these Gaonim had yeshivas and so on and so forth. And basically the Rambam finishes off that people are not capable of sifting through the Talmud or properly. It's very difficult to draw the laws out of the Talmud. And therefore, you'll see the bottom line, we'll go through all this whole business, but this is because this is later in history. Therefore, he says, I girded my loins, I, Moses, the son of Maimon of Spain, the Sephardi, I realized upon the book, I relied upon the rock, Hashem, blessed be he, And I contemplated all these segments, sought to compose a work which would include the conclusions derived from all the texts regarding the forbidden and permitted, the impure and the pure, and the remainder of the Torah laws, all in clear and concise terms, so that the entire oral law could be organized in each person's mouth without questions or objections. That was the genius of the Rambam. Okay, he did it in the way of if you open up a Talmud today, everything's in English, but still you don't know how to learn Gemara. And even when you do, what's the law? What exact? It's all piled in there. And for the layman today, it's almost impossible. He cannot rely on himself, except in obvious cases, to rule. Everything stems, however, from the Talmud. Why? Because that was the last time there was a consensus. After that, we were dispersed, and there wasn't this kind of unity that we may have wanted. So this is the story of the oral law. This is the story of the Torah Shebaal Peh, and that's why we realize over here that made up all the Jewish laws. No one made them up. There's a golden chain that stems from Moshe Rabbeinu right until the end. So anything that we pick up today, we can trace every one of those laws back. Nobody was interested in just saying, well, I think this, that, and the other. Every one of those laws are firmly based in the Talmud, or at some point before the Talmud, a consensus came, and these things were decided with all their details, and therefore, each one of them has the weight, shall we say, carries the weight of Torah itself. This is the thing of the day of the Rambam. In the middle of this page, it goes on the Geonim and so on. But we're not up to that yet. Saying this is the Rambam goes after he explains why he wrote his book. Right, so that's a different discussion, which we'll get there, what the Rambam achieved. But now, at least when we get to the Gemara, we know what the Gemara is. That's why people learning Gemara, learning in yeshiva, they learn Gemara. Because ultimately everything has to be from the Gemara. Somebody just opened the Code of Jewish Law and reads off, right? So he'll know that thing. He'll know, do this, do that, which for many parts works. But we must know the background. We must know how all this came about, which is all pulled together in the Gemara. And once you learn enough Gemara, you have the tools with which how to understand Jewish law.
What's the actual interpretation of that word?
Gemara, likmor in Aramaic means to learn. I'm sorry, to learn. It's actually interesting. Apparently, I just said this today. It's in the footnotes in the back over here. That the word shas, which stands for Shisha Sedorim. Shisha Sedorim, 6, how do you say it? Not tractates, but parts. The Mishnah is divided in 6 parts. And the Talmud is based all on the Mishnah. The Talmud is, you have a Mishnah. If you've looked in a Talmud, you have a Mishnah. And then you have pages of Talmud which discuss the Mishnah. So apparently, the name Talmud is the real name for it. Everybody called it Talmud. The name Shas became a code name because Talmud was forbidden by the church, and they burned the Talmud, and therefore Shas became the word. Yeah, it's an acronym. It became a different name, but they didn't know what Shas was or something like that. So that was the idea. So we'll cover the Rabbeinu Kodesh and this. There was a man called Hillel, not to be mixed up with the original Hillel. This is he was a 13th generation from his ancestor, the famous Hillel. Hillel Hashemi, the second Hillel. It's talking about Hillel, but as great as Hillel was, he is referred to as Hillel Hasheni, the second Hillel, not for no reason. He did something which was of priceless value for the Jewish people, and that's what it was. He set the Jewish calendar. Let's get a bit of background. Up until this point, from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu until this time, the months were set and the years were set by the Sanhedrin, by court that were in Jerusalem. How was it done? The Torah says that make the month lies in the hands of the Beis Din, of the High Court. And they did it by getting witnesses, the witnesses who saw the new moon, the new moon that came about after it being concealed. Those witnesses who had seen the new moon came to Jerusalem, testified to the fact that they had seen the new moon, and the new month was proclaimed. And only when the Beis Din proclaimed it did it actually become a new month. They had a limit. It was either on day number, there was 29 days in a month, it was either day number 30 to be Rosh Chodesh, to be the first day of the new month, or day number 31, Rosh Chodesh. If the no witnesses came by day 31, they proclaimed the Rosh Chodesh anyway. But that's where we get the 2 days from. It was either one of those 2 days. Therefore, the Jews who were able to hear of the new month being proclaimed had 1 day Yom Tov, and the Jews that weren't able had 2 days Yom Tov. That's how it all came about. We spoke about this last week. So, this is what was going on from the time of Moshe until this time. It was at this time when Hillel Hasheni, this Hillel, saw that the Sanhedrin was not going to be able to convene for too much longer. It had already been, so to speak, exiled. It was not convening in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was destroyed. It was convening after Jerusalem. It was in a place called Usha. From Usha, that's in the Galil in Israel. Then from there, it went somewhere else. It was going to fall apart in Emet. So so something very drastic had to be done. What's going to be now with the Jewish calendar? What's going to be? How are we going to keep any Yom Tov, any time? So what he did was, there are rules which, if you want to see a synopsis of those rules, by Maimonides, puts down. Maimonides was a genius of a man, and he put down. He had a mind for astronomy like no one else. He studied all the books of Greek books, all these things, and he laid down in clear language that even the layman can understand. You got to put your head to it. It's very difficult, but if you go stage by stage, slowly, you can understand the dynamics of the Jewish calendar. And the main idea is to be able to tell exactly where and when the new moon will be at that beginning of that month. We actually announced this in many Chabad shuls on the Shabbos Mavorchim, the Shabbos before before Rosh Chodesh, we bless the new month. And before that, the custom is to announce that Jerusalem, we go by Jerusalem. When in Jerusalem, to the minute, not just to the minute, but to the second, it's called Chalokim. Chalokim are astronomy gives how do we say degrees, but not just degrees. Degrees are very general. Within the degree, you have not a bunch of degrees, but in those things, you have little,
So how many halacha are there to an hour? Let's see.
You caught me there, but okay, and see.
I've been hearing it for years.
I believe if there's don't quote me on this. I believe if there's 160 degrees, 360 degrees, and I think there's 1,080 halakim in each one. Don't me.
Each degree?
Yeah. Wow. The degree is not the degree is the sky. Say the talking is the
Circle on the table.
not a circle on the table.
160 degrees is just
Yeah. I believe. Don't quote me on this. This is gonna have to.
Big circle.
It's a big circle.
Really?
Anyhow, so they're all rules in astronomy where you can work this to the split second. Anyhow, so it's doable. It's very doable.
sometimes they say parts instead of the number word.
So what he did was Hillel and posed the problem. They agreed that this was eventually, at least not for now. So what they did is every month the Beis Din, the court, would sanctify the new month. They would say, Kodesh, the Rosh Chodesh, today is a holiday, so it's Rosh Chodesh, we know Rosh Rosh Chodesh is a special day, especially to the women. What they did was they made at that time. They worked out. They laid down the rules to the Jewish known, but actually followed it. They knew one of the ways that they would test out the witnesses. They knew what they were talking about because they knew exactly when the new moon would be seen. Okay, and they knew how it would look and where it would be if the new moon would be pointing this way a little further. They knew everything, and it's all known today. They knew exactly. They only needed the witnesses because that's what the Torah said. Torah says the witnesses. When you have witnesses that actually saw it, then you can do it. What they did is that they set the calendar by where they knew when the moon is going to be seen and sanctified every single Rosh Chodesh from that time until the coming of Mashiach. Which meant that they laid out the rules for the Jewish calendar, and any Jew, anywhere, was able to fulfill the Yom Tovim, Rosh Chodesh, to observe the holidays anywhere they may be. Which was a major, we can even compare it to writing down of the oral Torah. Oral Torah didn't need to be written down for however many, for over 1,000 years, until the days of Moses, until the days of Rabbi, What do you need to write it down for? The Jews were together. There was transmission from teacher to student. Everything was going well. Now came a time when that wouldn't be, and so too was the Jewish calendar. And hence, you have the stories of Jews landing up in a desert island, or Jews in concentration camps who knew exactly when Pesach was, or when Rosh Hashanah was, to the day. No questions. Well, they didn't have one of these calendars come out sent out to Bergen Belsen, I'm saying. It didn't. They knew, because the rules are quite clear, and if you put your head to it, Maimonides says, the simple part of what I just wrote, even a child can acquire this knowledge in about 3 days. The Rabbi was talking about one of his kids or one of our kids, but he said they're very, very simple. And when they are, if you put it's math. But you've got to put it together, and it's doable. Oh yeah, he codified it. Yeah. The place where you'll see it all laid down and put together.
They knew.
Scientifically, I got to tell you, there's been articles written recently that things that scientists who astronomers have only found now were already known by the sages of the Talmud, by what they said, things which didn't seem to be correct scientifically. And there's been this just recently, a few months ago, somebody showed me an article written in Israel, a mind-blowing article. And you have to swallow one of these astronomy books to understand it. But it's the exactness to of what they knew then could only have been something godly. Could only be something given from the Almighty. But on Sinai, they got the rules of how to do this. It's a fascinating subject. Anyway. Okay. Now moving back a little, the Mishnah was written down in 218, and this is when the Jews started, the Torah started to happen. It was all in that era. However, from the year 235 until the year 350 was the time in Israel when there was still yeshivas. This was a gradual descent. But that was the time when the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, was put together. There are two Talmuds. There are two versions of the Talmud. There are two Talmuds. One is called the Talmud Babylonian Talmud, put together in Babylon, and one the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud. That was written by Rabbi Yochanan, who we went through him last week. They managed to put together the Talmud, although declined, but the Talmud Yerushalmi was nevertheless put together. Babylon also wasn't absolutely, we did say it wasn't a paradise. There were times when things got tough, especially there was the Gemara actually makes note of a fellow called Ardashir, I think his name was, who he took over the reign in Babylon. He was quite a fanatical individual, and he had all sorts of things that went along with his religion. For example, he forbade lighting candles at night, which meant that Hanukkah candles couldn't be lit, and the Gemara has a whole discussion of where Hanukkah lights, which should be put in a public place, either by the door, by the front door, says the Gemara, at the time of the Pharisee, in the time of the Persian, sort of, this guy was Neo-Persian, who didn't allow lights, so you could put it on the table, says the Gemara. This was where the discussion of the Gemara comes out because of this sort of 15-year period, but a very, very difficult period. But even though he did have some very evil decrees, the Kehillah, the community in Babylon blossomed, didn't disturb its ongoing growth, and it was in this era, starting from about 200, give or take, 7 generations, the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, was put together. Now, that was a major work. What it was is, you have, what is the Talmud? What is the Gemara? We're referring mainly to the Talmud Bavli. The Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, went along similar lines, but today, since the Kehillah, since the community in Babylon was then on the increase, most of the great were over there, and especially later on, when the migration from Israel came to Babylonia, they had it all. They had the great from Israel, and they had their own great, which constitutes the fact that we follow today and learn primarily today the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud. What was it? Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi drew to the prince, put together the Mishnah, as we said in about the year 218. He put it together in a very, very concise manner. It really was, it was a project which was the beginning of the writing of the oral law. They want to say, some historians even say it's because of his lack of excitement to do it. It was something which they had to revert to. If this is what it looks like, we will write down just the key things, and all the discussion will remain oral. So we'll have a basis. That's how some people want to understand it, which is very understandable. He wrote things very, very concise, just that things should be written down in its essence, in its seminal way, so not to be forgotten. Now, after that, what the yeshivas were doing and what the greats of the generation were doing were discussing the Mishnah. You have a Mishnah. Let's take the very first Mishnah of the Talmud, okay? First Mishnah of the Talmud is, there's a mitzvah to read the Shema in the evening. Evening, we say this in the Shema. When you lay down, and what does it mean when you lay down? When you write oral Torah, you should read Shema in the evening and in the morning. Okay. So the question is now, says the Mishnah, when's considered an evening? When do we consider it? Says the Mishnah has a couple of opinions. There's one says this is actual nightfall, one says a little before nightfall. So the Gemara and the Talmud comes and looks at it and says, well, what made this opinion say what he says? Where did they get it from? And more importantly, who do we rule like? Okay? There are many, many principles by which we follow in order to figure this out. Besides that, Judaism has a very lot of information which are around these laws. Learning now, the beginning of the first tractate, starts talking about, rising it starts talking about the night being split into 3 parts. What's the night being split into 3 parts? The whole story comes, the Talmud goes into King David. King David got up. What time did he get up? It's a whole shebang, right? Where's all that information? Not in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says the law. The Talmud is a record of the discussion which came about from the Mishnah. You can imagine you have an instruction, a very short instruction for a very major thing, and there's obviously a lot of discussion around it. 7 generations that Talmud makes record of, and we'll mention a few of them. Now, all these names are, these names you can any kid who started learning Gemara, started learning the Talmud will be all too familiar with all these names. Many of them worked in pairs called contemporaries. We mentioned like Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, who worked in a tremendous way together. There was in the generations, along these generations, a pair of people called Rav and Shmuel. Now, Rav means Rabbi, and we only had that before with Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Judah the Prince, also called Rabbi. He was in Israel, so Rabbi in Hebrew. Rav, who's Rav? His name was Rabbi Abba, but he was such a great man that people simply called him Rav. Shmuel was his counterpart. Shmuel also was very well versed in secular knowledges as well as Torah. He said he lived in a place called Nahar Dor, and he said the pathways of the heaven, of the constellations, are as clear to me as the pathways of Nahar Dor. He was a genius of a man who also had very great contact with the Babylonian philosophers and astronomers and people who highly respected him. Just to give you an idea, in the Talmud, Rav and Shmuel are quoted hundreds of times, mostly arguing with each other. And this was the clash. You had some. It was always, as we mentioned, by Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. They always wanted somebody to think differently, to deal differently, and much of it followed logic. Some of it followed tradition. An argumented tradition, an unclarity which the Gemara always has to unravel, has to make clear this unclarity. Did he get it right? Did he get it wrong? If there's a few people who said one thing, then he's refuted. Yeah, this is how it goes. The law always follows Rav when it comes to forbidden matters or permitted matters. Is something kosher or not? And Rav and Shmuel will have an argument. The law follows